Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. The election is coming and people are beginning to think, well, who the hell shall I vote for? I'm not actually very enamoured with any of the big parties. We've seen how they've performed over the last X many years, had in your own number there. And there seems to be a huge demand for independence like never before. And I've had a number of people saying, Richard, can I come on the show and tell you about my manifesto? And can I tell you this? I want to stand up. And I thought, well, gosh, there's a lot of you. So I have chosen a very lovely bloke who I met about a year ago at the Great Rising in Stroud in June it was. And I've been on various Zooms and he's been there and he is standing as an independent. And I thought, here we go. This would be quite interesting because he's based down in Cornwall. And we know that Cornwall has a number of interesting in inverted commas problems which we can talk to. He is a former detective as well, so he's used to analytical thinking, which is rather grand, and he is in his secret laboratory by all accounts. His name is David Laity and he joins me now. David,
Good morning,
how are
Richard.
you? It's lovely to see you in your secret laboratory down there
Morning,
in
Richard.
Cork.
Nice to see you again. Yes,
Thank you so much for joining me. Now, we met at something called the Great Rising
yes,
a year or so ago, in which we got the what should we say, the movers and shakers of the truth and sovereign movement, people who were aware that things were not quite going right and had ideas and notions to put forward. It's a year gone by. You're standing now as an independent, which is fascinating. And you've got together a manifesto. And as I said at the beginning, you're down there in Cornwall. We know that there, and you told me a year ago, the big plan from people like the WEF of what they're doing to Cornwall. So I want to get into a little bit about that as well. But let's start with standing as an independent. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then what made you want to become an independent.
yeah. Thanks, Richard. Yeah, I'm standing as an independent for the St Ives and Isles of Scilly constituency in Cornwall, which includes Penzance, Houston, and the Lizard Peninsula. My life's work has been in this area. Firstly, as a medical scientist of all things, so an analytical scientist, medically qualified, and I did that for 4 or 5 years before changing to the police, and eventually became a police officer and a community constable in many of these local areas, followed by joining CID as a detective. And I'm very aware of all the problems in the area. I have actually brought up 8 offspring in this area, ranging from 43 years to 23 years in age, 4 boys and 4 girls. So I'm well aware of the struggles of the youth of this area. And as you say, Cornwall has a lot of special issues, problems, which are not apparent to the people ruling us from London, shall we say. And it has thrown up some serious problems for the youth who are having no choice but to migrate from the area, which is causing compounding the issue and causing further problems. And I'll go into that in a minute when we start talking about the issues that we're doing. So I've been investigating privately fraud and liaising with elements at governmental level and attending Parliament. And I was in the Palace of Westminster only about 12 weeks ago at a big debate. And it became apparent that they're listening but not hearing, shall we say. And shall we say, there are elements I have discovered through experience over 15 years of private investigation within the system that are corrupting the system. And that it's not the system per se that's bad. We have a very powerful infiltration of rogue elements which seem to be able to take over the narrative of each department that I've been in. And I've found this everything from the Serious Fraud Office, the National Crime Agency, to Parliament, who I've engaged quite forcefully with robust evidence of many criminal offences, and amounting to about £3.5 billion. And in 2019, I attended a meeting with many MPs in Westminster at an official all-party parliamentary group into banking, fairer banking, when the chairman declared that the government, i.e. the APPG and the government, were aware that a bank in particular that I'm dealing with was being investigated for defrauding the public and small and medium enterprises of £100 billion. That woke up a lot of people in the room.
I'm sure it did.
And this chairman, an MP at the time, or co-chairman, an MP at the time, he is now a minister. And he went on to say that collectively they were aware that the banks, quote, have criminally defrauded the British public and SMEs of £1.2 trillion, unquote.
Crikey.
Now, I have been trying to engage our evidence with that for many, many years. And here we are 5 years on, and the post office looms its ugly head with all the cover-ups that went on in there. And lo and behold, the same government person is now involved in that and has been for some time. And I suspect that what we're seeing on the public side is not everything that I'm seeing as an investigative through my contacts there's a lot of good people in government. There's a lot of good people wanting to do a lot of good. But unfortunately, they are being stifled by what I call the rogue elements, for one thing, for a better word. And some of it's corruption, some of it's manipulation. But what I have found is that the real stories are not coming out until they go public. And I got to the end of my tether only last week, last Tuesday, when I had one of those sod it moments. And I shouted that out, or a stronger word, to my wife in the car driving. And she said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Everybody's saying, what are they going to do about it? It's time somebody did." So I thought, well, armed with the information I've got, let's analyze what we can do, use my skills of investigation and contacts all over the country, and find out what we can do to help the locals, in particular this area. So I decided to put up only last Tuesday as an independent. So I'm late to the races, but I have a fantastic team of volunteers encouraging me, and it's just taken off. And it seems that everybody here wants a change. So I've asked them what they want. Might be a novel idea in politics. I'm not a politician, but I've asked them what they would like to see. And
Right.
the feedback from the youth has been astounding. They are so clever. They are so well versed with what is going on. It shocked me. And it's time to listen. They're our future, and we need to know. And they have given me more information in a week than I've managed to gather from official bodies in several years.
That is really interesting, especially about the young. And funnily enough, over the I suppose the months that I've been talking about the various things on the show that I've been talking about, every now and again I'll get either young people themselves or others saying, "Look, we do know what's going on. Don't think that we're all ignorant. It's just," and they've got a different idea of how they're going to achieve it, of course, than perhaps people who've been around a long time and dealing with mortgages and sort of many of the realities of life. In Cornwall, generally, what's the normal political colours? Does it fluctuate much, or is it more one than other?
Well, up until about 7 years ago, it was predominantly Lib Dems, where Andrew George was the MP. And don't get me wrong, he was fighting hard for Cornwall, and he got involved in a case for me, and he was very supportive up to a point. That was taken over by the Tories. Derek Thomas MP took over, and he's the current MP. Or should I say the recent MP, because Parliament was dissolved last Friday, wasn't it?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, he's the current MP, and he has stood up shoulder to shoulder with me against the rogue elements that are dealing with a particular case that you're aware of that I'm involved in, a very serious case of fraud against me and some other people. Now, Derek Thomas has supported me up to a point, but as a party member, he can only go so far. And I got the feeling that maybe he is frustrated that he can't, he has brought it up in the House 3 times. But as I say, the rogue elements seem to have every avenue covered where they can take on an inquiry and then kick it into the long grass, or
Yes.
deal with it in a different way than it should be dealt with. Now, Lady Hale, Baroness Hale, has said in Supreme Court that justice not only has to be done, it needs to be seen to be done, and no one in this country is above the rule of law. and anyone should have access to law, and it should be quick and swift. And I always quote Baroness Hale. I rate her very highly. Um, that does not seem to be happening. So that's a reason. That's a reason why I went for independence. And it seems that Cornwall has had enough of the big three, I call them,
Yes.
which have revolved around taking it in turns. Didn't
Yes.
Einstein once say, repeating the same operation over and over again and expecting a different result is madness? So
Yeah,
let's
certainly is.
try it different. Let's do something different.
So I'll ask you about your manifesto
Yeah.
and what the young people have asked for, which, as you say, is a novelty. I wish the rest of the government would do that. Ask us what actually we want, and then go across it. But before we do that,
Yeah.
just on the idea that there's so many independents now, do you think that a the vast majority of people are going to be hungry for for change and go for an independent wherever they are in the country, up and down the land? And do you think that once there is a number, there can be a significant coherent change if you've got X many independents sitting there?
Yeah, I think you're right. I've recently my campaign manager, my joint campaign manager, is currently visiting family in Ireland, and she's reported back on the recent Irish elections, and there seems to be a massive sweep, a landslide towards independence because they're reporting they've had enough of the big three, and that seems to be the feedback I'm getting with contacts all over the country. They're looking for something different, and the only thing different is that we haven't had is. Um, I don't know whether you'd call it a coalition, but a plethora of independents throughout the country. Now, I mean, coming to this late, I'm not a politician. I'm a practical, analytical problem solver. And I see this as a problem that needs solving. And logically, we together, as a beta test that Google does, for instance, they put it out to the public and they get feedback. And that works because we together know everything. Individually, I don't know anything, and neither does anyone else. But together, if we pool our intelligence and knowledge, we can come up with the solutions. And I'm pretty good at strategizing things like that, and that's what I've been trained to do. So I have given it a little bit of thought when you asked me to come on the show as how an independent would make a difference. I believe that if enough independents won seats throughout the country to show the level of feeling, I think it's going to be very difficult for an individual independent to actually become prime minister, for instance.
Right.
However, if we had an alliance, not a party, but an alliance of independents, where an independent with the authority and the wishes of the public was put in as prime minister. I mean, let's face it, our last three prime ministers have not been voted for by the public.
It's true.
See,
Yeah.
I think it should be a public decision, and an independent could then sit in number 10. Maybe I'm not suited for it because I'm not that far into politics, but as a problem solver,
Hmm.
I could bring something to the table with other independents working together to solve the problems. Because let's face it, we're in a mess.
Yes.
No denying it, we're in a mess. Wherever you look, we are in a mess. Every system that's in this country running at the moment is in a mess, and it seems to be financial. And the finances seem to be the lion's share of the finances always seem to be going to the parent companies, which are invariably foreign owned, and shareholders. I mean, we have situations here where one of the local, I won't identify it, but one of the local utility suppliers is owned by a foreign entity. Um, its company had 147 million pounds in shareholder value last year. That parent company had 177 million, but the actual infrastructure only received 44 million, and that's all coming from the utilities. So I do a little bit of research and come up with these. These are approximate figures that we can find, but they are official from Companies House compared with the utility companies' records. So we have a massive imbalance of shareholder versus investment in infrastructure, and that seems to be a theme throughout wherever we look throughout the country, a theme for creating the situation that we're in.
And surely the idea of grassroots people getting into government, people who know their local environment, who know the people, has got to be something worth giving a go, because for the last, well, as long as I can remember, it's always people who've come from the same schooling, the same sort of career politics, and they're supposed to know how we want to live. I mean, they all live in their own private gated houses. They live and mingle with their own clubs and stuff. They're not in the real environment. I mean, I know the MPs will say, "Oh, well, I do my surgery on a Friday," and it's like, well, big deal. But then you disappear.
Really?
You're not representative of the land and the people of the towns and the villages, and so that's where surely the idea of change and independence coming up, going, well, we've got this vast knowledge of actually having a job before we go into politics and interacting with real people and problem solving, as you've said. So I'm hoping that as you've alluded to there, an alliance would be something that the general, enough numbers would be voting for. I mean, that's the key thing. Do you think?
It is the key thing. I mean, we should politics. I think I people have said to me, "Oh, what are you going to do if you get employed by the government?" And my answer to that is, I'm not employed by the government. There's no such thing as government funding. It's taxpayer funding routed via the government. It's taxpayers, your money. It's my money,
Right.
your money. And where's it all going? What happened? What went wrong? I mean, and I say to them, if I'm elected and paid to do a job, you are my employers. You, the taxpayers, employ me, and I should damn well do what I'm told by the taxpayer, not by somebody remote who has no idea.
I mean, this is what MPs should be. This is something they should know, but they certainly, you go to an MP, and I've had people writing and saying, "Well, I've got this problem, or I'm worried about this," and they're dismissed. And we've seen that through
Yes.
with the medical intervention. People have got genuine worries about something that might have been rushed through, even if we
Mhm.
don't go down any conspiracy about that it's whatever, but it's just rushed through. It's never been tested for 10 years, say, on pregnant women, and I'm being asked to take it or mandated in my job, and I've got these worries, and the MP just going, no, it's safe and effective, and they're not listening to the people who are effectively employing them.
Exactly, and they're particularly not listening to the subject matter experts that really matter. We find that all the time, and we employ or we engage with subject matter experts on subjects that we don't know about. And I was a late university goer, and I only graduated. I did a 3-year degree course because somebody bet me a pound I wouldn't do it. Ah, which has got to be.
That's
And I
great.
had the time of my life at Falmouth University for 3 years. What a brilliant university. Absolutely. That's Cornwall. But again, they're suffering from funding. And I sort of resonated with the lecturers who some of which I went to school with. So I was sort of I was sort of the oldest student in town, but I learned an awful lot from that. And what I did
Yes.
is what I knew, but didn't actually, it wasn't in the forefront of my mind. What I did learn is that if you're going to debate a subject, you really do need to have robust scientific evidence, and not just one. You need a number of robust scientific reports which have been peer reviewed and source referenced, by which then you can make an informed decision on doing and an outcome. Now, I've adopted that recently because I've had lots of people come to me and say, are you standing up for X, Y, and Z? And if so, can you sign our petition and do that? Now, my response to that is, um, I would love to engage with you, and I'd love to hear your argument on whatever the topic is, whether it's, we were talking earlier about um, the allegation of chemtrails being sprayed, right the way through to climate change, right the way through to housing problems. But I'm suggesting that if we gather together robust peer-reviewed evidence and then examine that and pick out the elements of that which are factual and need addressing, then we can address it in a more robust and a more informed and calculated way.
I mean, some people might say that some of those things which might look like conspiracy theories, say a medical intervention that has been pushed hasn't got the correct peer review papers because it's been, we've followed the science,
Yes.
or man-made climate change is another one where we follow, the science is fixed, and yet there is a number of scientists who say, well, it's not bloody fixed, and science can never be fixed, but funding and corporate interest and government interest as well means that certain people who've got what would be peer-reviewed material cannot get it peer-reviewed because of the system is against them, because that's the wrong narrative. What would you say to that?
Well, again, we're seeing the rogue elements within that system manipulating things for financial gain. And it comes back to the same issue, really. Follow the money. And so many people say follow the money, but if you really do follow the money, and it is now possible with the assistance of AI, which we use a lot, my team are using it a lot, you can speed up research. And although it's not gospel, you have to analyze and have a sensible approach to the results that you get. But you can analyze these things in much quicker time now. And what we are finding time and time again is no matter where you look, it can cross over from the judiciary right the way through to science. The rogue elements seem to have a stranglehold. How they've done it over the years is quite remarkable and very, very clever. Very clever. I take my hat off to them being so clever to create a system that is so tied up with so few operatives spread around. But we find that is the situation, and it is all financial. And if we tackle where the money's coming from, usually we can find the route by which the manipulation is occurring, and there we can factor that into the analysis of the studies and pull in other experts to give a proper peer review. I mean, our team, as I said before, I don't know everything, but my team are so good now that they have more or less any walk of life that we need to follow up. Somebody in my team has got a contact who knows somebody who can come up with an expert on a thing. And we don't just rely on one expert. We'll bob it around, we'll pass it around and make sure that they're on the same page. What we'll do is we'll ask 3 or 4 different experts and see the variation in the reports. And sometimes it's happened recently. We've had 3 come back, and none of them knew each other. None of them knew what we were doing, but they were almost word for word. And that tends to give you a confidence that they're all telling you the truth, or they're not being interfered with, if various people from various walks of life marry up with the same argument.
Yes. So let's look at your manifesto.
Yes.
And before we get there, I'm just going to precede this with when you look at what we are offered at the moment from our current government and the 2 main parties, which on the whole, I mean, I classify most of what they are thrusting at us as pretty anti-human. We've got these policies which are there to contain people in these so-called 15-minute cities. We've got rollout of technology, 5G technology, for example, which again, like the medical intervention, has not really been tested sufficiently, set up by rogue companies who are not actually on Companies House. And so you've got all of those sort of issues coming in, and many, many more. So when you go to the grassroots and you're asking people what they want and you come up with your manifesto, it's obviously going to be, hopefully, a breath of fresh air for those people who are going into the polling booth. So tell us, David, what does your manifesto as an independent offer?
My manifesto is as of the suggestions of the people I've been speaking to and my experience with in locally. And can I do it? No. Can you do it? Probably not. But together, can we do it? Hell yes, we can if we stick together and as an independent thing. So I've prioritized everything that I've seen to be the most important thing down here. The biggest issue is farming and housing. And there are other issues such as schooling and mental health, etc., which we will address. As I say, we're new to it. We've put topics down, and those are some of the main topics. We will engage with people in all of those walks of life to see the best way forward. But we have a massive housing crisis. And let's just pick on that one for the start,
Mm.
see how we got to where we are. We asked people what the biggest problem with the area was, and undoubtedly the youth were saying that they've got no hope of buying a house. I have a son who's 23 years old and he's on £11 an hour. He has to pay £9.60 a day to park his car to go to work. So the first hour's pay is gone. I
Yeah.
mean, that's no, and he's on a 0 hours contract, so he's cancelled whenever he's not needed. So, and that's not just my son. There's so many people in that position. They've got no hope. They're just about surviving, just about. And so we looked at the the comments, and the comments were it's the rich people coming down and buying up all the houses.
Right.
Right.
Which is a sort of more unique thing to Cornwall than many places, but many coastal places
Yes.
or desirable places will have the same problem.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, it's a free world, and if you've got that money, you can do that. But what we're trying to say is we can't ban people's freedom of purchase and movement. But what we can do is make a system where we can bring back a balance. Now, I was looking at other countries, and I've spent a lot of time abroad, and countries such as France, Italy in particular, Bulgaria, those places have had a mass migration of youths because there was no work in the area. And
Right.
holiday areas became basically deserted. And you can literally this week buy a property in parts of Italy for €1, providing you commit to live there for 5 years and renovate the property. Now,
I'll see you later, mate.
yeah, exactly. There you go. So the reason is that there was a mass migration because the work and payment and the house prices didn't tally. So how can we address that? So we've
Right.
looked at that as a problem, right? And this is what we're going to do for farming. We're going to do it for about mental health and school and everything. But this is just an example of how we would examine it. And we look at it and say, how can we sensibly solve that? We've got houses. The average house price in St Ives is 495,000. Now, the
Bloody hell.
government,
500,000.
500,000, the government criteria for affordable housing is that it should be offered for by the county for 50 to 80% discount. Well, let's take 50% discount on that.
That's
We are
250.
still looking at figures where people will require approximately £40,000 for deposit and fees and a minimum income of 49,500 a year to sustain a mortgage for half that value.
Right.
It
Which
doesn't,
is
it's not going to happen, right?
no.
So that is the problem. The housing stock, they're building houses, but they're selling them as affordable houses. Now, what is an affordable house? In my mind, it's something that the youth can afford.
Mm.
There's no such thing. They can't afford it. House sharing and all that. Here's a radical idea, and I'm giving it away to the other parties. And if they steal it from me and implement it, all well and good. I don't mind because it's a solving of a problem. I
Right.
don't mind telling you. Um, just it needs examination and it needs more work. But initially, if we collected the council tax on the holiday properties in the county, I'm not saying I'm charging them any more, but if we
No.
ring fenced that in a separate pot, and the county was to use that alone to build affordable housing, and no matter what their market value is, sell them to people who want to work and live in this area for a maximum, for example, I'm not saying figures, but for example, 100,000. People working in here could afford a mortgage of 100,000 or a rent of a house that's worth 100,000. They could afford the deposit and stay there. And what we will be doing is keeping a workforce in the local area, stopping them being forced out. We will then be providing the infrastructure to supply the holiday tourism industry and the holiday homes that would otherwise lie empty without the service industry. We will have cleaners, we'll have maintenance, we'll have pubs, cafes, and restaurants and amenities worked by the youth, farming worked by the youth to supply the holiday industry, which will be a boost of an income. So we will be keeping the lion's share of the income within the county in a sort of a money go round where the tourism industry can benefit the lack of housing and keep the youth in the workforce, which is our future, keep them in the area. I don't know the mechanics of that, but generally we need to examine something along those lines and keep our youth, our hardworking future youth, in this area. Otherwise, the area will end up like that place in Italy. There will be thousands of £1 million properties and nobody to service them.
And if they anybody does service them, they'll be at minimum, or there'll be people coming into the country to do that,
Yes,
rather than.
well, again, follow the money. Contractors are getting far too much through non-tendered contracts through counties, county councils, which we can prove. Some of those companies are now limited and exempt from audit because they're under the umbrella of the local authorities. That scares me to death. A company with a monopoly on supplying services that is exempt from audit is a disaster waiting to happen. And I examined that, and only on Sunday afternoon I spoke to a young carpenter who very sensibly said to me, I live in a local town in my constituency, and he says, I work for a contractor who has unlimited funds to service the properties on their books in the county. He says, they pay me £25 an hour plus mileage. He says, I've got a little lady, Mrs. Smith, down the road who wants a carpentry job done, and she wants to pay me the going rate of £11 an hour. He said, I'd love to help her, but I can't. He said, I've got the same situation as everybody else where I've got to take the £25 an hour contract. And he said, that is an issue where sole non-tendered contractors are pitching the price that they have, taking the profit first, and then paying whatever's left on the service.
Right. I mean, that sounds terrible, because so that Mrs. Miggs at 32 Acacia Avenue can't get that nice bespoke cupboard made.
Correct.
And ends up having, if anything, to settle for either something second-hand that will fit in wherever it is, or going to one of these flat pack places that are ubiquitous up and down the land. One of the things that seems to me is that if you want to try and keep people in an area, other than I have had experience with a friend of mine who was dealing with the Universal Credit people, and they're quite happy to have you on the books, provided that you only work in existing big corporations or doing nothing that gives you your personal pride, your value, or the chance to better yourself. It's just like, get a job, and it can be in a supermarket or some department store, because that's nice and easy, but it's an unskilled profession. Surely part of keeping people in an area that they're born in and that they like and feel home is to give them a sense of future, so that they can either set up their own business or be part of somebody else's business, small family run, small businesses, a company of people, not big corporations, so that they can see a future in their lives. Because people will migrate away and think, oh, I need to get into IT or whatever it is, but that's over in London or in Manchester or Birmingham or these big places. And whilst I hear you about servicing people in houses, a lot of people will go, well, I don't want to be someone's servant, effectively. They want to run their own business. Now, farming, we mentioned,
Yes.
which again has virtually turned into a corporation business by these big industrial farms. But there is a huge movement now for new farmers, small farms, going back to the old idea of locally produced food. I know that we've had this conversation before. Tell us what's happening in the farming industry and what you might be proposing within your manifesto.
Well, from my personal experience, there's a lot of rewilding going on some farms down here and compulsory purchase. And we're investigating the information that farmers are being paid to retire early, and they're being given up to 130% of their normal pension pot if they pack in farming. Now, if you factor that in with the agenda that you were talking about, the 2030 agenda, etc., that indicates that there will be zero farming in Cornwall within the next few years, certainly by 2030. Now, Cornwall is one of the breadbaskets of the country, and the rest of the country rely on produce from Cornwall. As you say, the big corporations are taking over. And again, here we are with follow the money. The money is taking over. And it seems our assessment is, and I stand to be corrected, but my assessment and our team's assessment is that the hierarchy that are so far removed from the hardworking farmers in this county are making a lot of gain, financial or prestige, from favouring the big corporations making big money rather than looking at investing in the lower end, the workers, which is actually producing the wealth of the country from the grassroots up.
Yes. I mean, it seems an obvious thing to invest in the younger, in the workforce,
Mm,
because the corporations just grow, and they sort of gobble up everybody else, and then you have one size fits all,
that's right.
and then the jobs, especially with AI coming in, the jobs become very, what can we say, boring. Let's just say it that, very sort of simplistic and with no passion, nothing to sort of get you to want to go to work and serve people other than
Well,
push button exercises.
I might challenge that because the youth I'm talking to, especially the young farmers groups, and I'm meeting them in the street and stopping, and they're really engaging. They're not boring. Their job,
Right.
farming is highly skilled. It requires
Yeah.
a
No, I
lot
was thinking.
of,
I certainly wasn't. I wasn't
no,
suggesting that. I was suggesting as the big corporates and
that's
AI
right,
come in, many manufacturing stuff is
correct.
now push. People are no longer using their hands.
No,
Farming, although people like Dyson are experimenting with drones and
yeah,
more robotics and stuff, and you can see from, I think Sainsbury's have this plan in which a lot of their farming is done underground with artificial lights and things by all robotics and water systems that humans are not even involved in, which is a nonsense.
it is a nonsense. Yes, I mean we've seen massive swathes of common land taken over by quangos down here. Milk farmers are under extreme pressure with quotas, and it's all controlled from outside of the county.
Right.
One of the suggestions was we'd have more farm shops. Now, we'd have to obviously make sure that that doesn't impact upon local shops. Some say it will impact on the supermarkets. Well, the supermarkets have impacted on the farmers and dictate the price to the farmers. It's one of
Yes.
the few one of the few trading situations within the economy that the customer dictates the price to the producer. I mean, you don't dictate to Amazon if you buy a book or a coffee machine off of Amazon, you don't tell them what you're going to pay. Market friends tell them what they can charge. That
Right.
seems to be the other way around with farming. A couple of the things that do seem to need addressing is that the costs of farming, the costs of produce and fertilizer and seed, etc., for farming is skyrocketing. Feed for animals is skyrocketing, and the tonnage price is off the charts. Now, where
Mm.
is the difference in that money going? Because I'm sure it's not trebled in cost to manufacture it. It's where it's going is to the big money again, the big corporations.
Yes.
Yet the produce that the farmers are going producing and selling, the price of that is dropping rapidly and being dictated to by the big buyers, again, the big bully corporations. If we could eliminate that situation, and perhaps how it would be done needs discussion, but put a ceiling price on animal feeds and fertilizers that no price could exceed that ceiling, and a bottom ground price on the minimum that produce could be sold for farmers, they would be able to calculate their profit margins within those two parameters and be able to succeed on a local level. But this seems to be the interference with not just farming, but education, mental health. It's all being interfered with from above, from corporations that are funding it with big money that are getting from us by upping the prices. They are extracting wealth from the working class, the people who actually create the wealth, and in oftentimes that we assess misusing it against us in a roundabout way.
Yes. I mean, it does often, when I hear what's going on, especially in places like Cornwall with all the rewilding and various things, you can't help feeling that we're going back to the enclosures where people were basically thrown off the land and their livelihood was taken away by the big landowners who suddenly said, actually, we're having all of this and we're putting in the hedges, and tough titty to you lot, go and sort your own stuff. And it does seem to be mirrored by
Well,
the corporations are these, the land owners now operating on their own systems with too much influence in government.
that's exactly what's happening. You hit the nail on the head. That is an exact analogy of what is happening. There's no getting away from it. Big business, big money is taking over, and the more it takes over, the narrower the funnel and the sharper the point of the pyramid. In other words, they're moving up towards the tip of the pyramid, where we will be governed. I mean, whether you believe it or not, Klaus Schwab has boasted that he's infiltrated every cabinet on the planet to the 50% mark, and that we will have a corporate governance in the UK by 2030. Now, just to think that that is a possibility, or somebody suggesting that, is scary, because if you look at the evidence, it is going that way. Whether that's the plan or not, and whether these people realize it or not, it seems to be going that way. And our assessment is we've got to stop it. We've got to bring things back local. We've got to have local control, listen to the locals. And as you say, the service industry down here, I wasn't just meaning the cleaning and the things, I'm talking
Right.
the entire infrastructure, which supports everything else. We need to maintain an infrastructure in every area in this country, but I'm just using Cornwall as a very, very big example, very good example of it. And Cornwall seems to be the farthest away from London, the farthest away, and seems to be getting the biggest of the raw deals. And
Yes.
all the other counties seem to be, as you say, the coastal ones seem to be following in the footsteps. And Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, don't let's forget the Isles of Scilly, which is an integral part of this constituency. Um, they are suffering badly, and it seems to be almost as if we are an experiment for the rest of the UK. And I think what's happening here, if we're not careful, it will be spread around the rest of the UK, and it will be a control thing. We will be under total control of corporate governance. Even if it's not a government, it will be financial.
I forget what it's called now. I read a book. Somebody sent me a book about Cornwall and the Duchy of Cornwall and all that. Have you not got? And I'm desperately trying to remember it. There is its own little parliament based on the miners.
Yes, it was a Stannery Parliament.
Stannery, that was the word I was
Stannery.
trying to get. Apparently, that has been reset recently. Is there? Somebody was telling me that a couple of months ago that the Stannery Parliament had been, that people had sat again after so much time and were planning to take back, because Cornwall itself, as I understand it, considers themselves to be a different country in the way that Wales is different from England, and therefore should not be. And I know there's been this argument about who's actually in control, whether it's Westminster or the Duchy of Cornwall, who seems to own more land outside of Cornwall than actually in Cornwall. Do you know anything about that?
A little. Thanks for asking me a question I can answer. I can't do the political shuffle. Yeah, I had a look at this from suggestions again around the county, and the Stannery Parliament was not used for 100 or so years since the mining decline, where
Right.
again big business sucked the lifeblood out of mining in Cornwall, and the Cornish miners had to migrate around the rest of the world to follow the work. Similar situation again. But the Stannery Parliament was never dissolved, but we have had several people, very knowledgeable people within the county, some of whom I know, have tried to reinstate the Stannery laws for Cornwall, which have not been repealed. They've
Right.
just been unused for a while. Now, they have come against terrific resistance from the statutory side.
Yes, I
It
bet.
can't be a special case. Now, you were saying about Wales being different to England, etc., and Cornwall considers itself. We are part of the United Kingdom, but we have different needs and different customs and different requirements. Um, and I would suggest that Scotland's a good example. For instance, university in Scotland. Scotland's part of the UK. Scotland's governed. It's got its own. Scottish Parliament, but it's mainly governed from England.
Oh, hello.
But
We've
the student fees are free. This is completely free. So, yeah,
sorry, no,
yeah. Here in
we just lost you
England,
for a moment.
we oh, did you? We've as I say, Scotland has got completely free student education in university, which is paid for from central funds, I take it. But
Right.
England and Wales and Scotland haven't. So there's an example of how part of the UK can operate differently, but still be integrated with the UK.
Yes.
So why can't we do that with Cornwall and Wales? Why can't we? The Stannery is not trying to overrule statute. Laws are there for a reason. Sometimes there's too many and they're too controlling, yes, and sometimes they're unjust. But laws are there to keep a semblance of order. And as an ex-policeman, I see the merits of having rules and laws, but not to the detriment of the operation of a particular county. Now, Stanley offers various things, various exemptions or various special circumstances for people involved in the mining industry. That's what it was. It was a mining industry, sort of a mining industry parliament, shall we call it, for want of a better word. It had
Mm.
its own coinage. The counting houses, which were the mine where the miners got paid and went to collect their pay, they actually produced their own coinage for legal tender, etc. And there are several laws or several regulations within the Stanley would be very beneficial to be re-implemented here. And I can't help wondering if that might be the reason why the statutory side are not happy to engage with the Stanley Parliament. But as far as I'm aware, behind the scenes, the Stanley Parliament is running. There are a lot of exponents of the Stanley Parliament system for Cornwall. And again, we could run it side by side.
And I mean, it seems to me that I mean, and good luck to them. In actual fact,
Yes.
good luck to people who live locally or in their area. They understand the people. They have their traditions and customs and their unique things. And everywhere around would have with their parishes and their councils. In theory, ought to be able to work in their shires independently and go forth and say, these are our special cases, or these are the things that are unique to us. This is how we want to live and how we want to operate, so that there isn't this one way of doing things which comes down from main government, and which is, I guess, comes back to the reason for having independents who will say, we know the area,
Yeah.
we know the people, these are our special circumstances. Yes, we've all got roads, we all drive on the left, and we'll all agree to be at 70 miles an hour as a national speed limit. But within our area, we would like to have more local farms, less corporate, perhaps no 5G, etc., etc. And other areas may say, well, actually, we're we're a city with high tech, and we want the 5G and more IT and less countryside. And they should be, if people want what they want collectively, then they ought to be able to have it. So,
Absolutely. I think you've absolutely nailed it there. That's exactly what it should be. And does that not hark back to what we discussed at the beginning of this interview, whereby perhaps an alliance of independents, each independent representing their constituency for what their constituency wants for their better furtherance, but liaising in Parliament with other independents and having a communal system, as you say, 70 miles an hour and certain things that are suitable for the entire country to adopt, which I don't think any independent will disagree with, certain things like that. But local issues would vary across the board, and our local issue is not going to impact upon anyone other than the big corporates who want to make money from it. Sure.
absolutely, yeah. And that this is the thing that, I mean, it seems we have this opportunity now to get people back interested in the local environment,
Yes.
in their local place, because we've seen. I mean, I've said this on my show many times now, that we used to have local radio, we used to have local newspapers,
Mhm.
people used to go to meetings, they used to be engaged. But as people travel to work and commute many hundreds of miles and all of that, we've forgotten what local and
Yes.
localism means and the importance of it, and people don't get involved.
Yes.
This surely now is is a chance, if people have got independent candidates, to start thinking about, actually, yeah, do I want, I mean, where I am down on the south coast of seaside town, we have buildings going up that
Mhm.
no longer reflect the seaside historic nature of a seaside town. They could be inner city London, for and everywhere you go, you see the same type of architecture. Well, that means everywhere is the same, which means that what's the point of travelling around and going to places like, say, Shrewsbury, which has timber framed Elizabethan houses or Georgian houses, and you go, oh, that's really nice, and you come to the seaside and you see the sort of seaside Kiss Me Quick or whatever, and piers and Victoriana and all of that. That makes the country interesting, proud, different, enjoyable, aesthetic, and all of that. And surely that's now where localism can come back to. This is our traditions and customs and things that we've always had. This is what we should not be having these ubiquitous buildings or ubiquitous policies or whatever it is, because what makes us special?
I totally agree. Yeah, if we're not special, what's the point? Life's boring, and I find so many people down here, they're pedaling hard and they're not even managing to stay still. They're going backwards. And it's causing an impact on physical and mental health, especially in the youngsters. It all needs addressing. And I think if we can fix the major problems, the other ones will fall into place. Like you say, enjoy life. What are we pedaling hard for? If you go back to the 60s, you had the single parent income. And if the other partner worked, that was pin money. That was my mother's word for it, pin money. And you could use that for holidays and all.
Yeah.
And if both partners wish to earn, we should have double the standards. They should be allowed to, but it should be enabled. But we would have a better standard of life than they did in the 60s because only one breadwinner was bringing in the money. But what's gone wrong? Something serious has gone wrong because now we've got two breadwinners who have to work just,
Yes.
just to stay still or go backwards. We are in 2024, for goodness sake.
I,
We've got technology to help us. We should have the best standard of life than ever before in history, and we're getting towards the worst. We've got people suffering mentally, physically, hardship, pedaling hard every day, and nothing is getting better. It's getting worse. It's not because they're not working hard enough, and it's not because we know the answer. We don't know the answers to fix it. We do know the answers. It's corporate greed has taken too much of a slice of the cake in every single agency. If you follow the agency through, the parent companies have even more parent companies, and every one of them takes a slice of the cake, and the actual services at the bottom have the smallest share of the cake. That's
yeah.
a big issue. And as you say, we want to travel around. I like traveling around the country. I like traveling around the world and seeing other cultures and engaging with people. But if we all end up the same, life's going to be really boring as well as hard. I mean, it could
Yeah.
be a lot easier. Yeah.
I think the opportunity is there. People
Mhm.
like yourself standing up and holding the flag and saying, "Hang on, let's think differently. Let's think more for us." And we're at that tipping point where if we don't start to do something, then the bulldozers of the corporate
Mhm.
industry will just take any opportunity that we have to have an interesting and thriving life away from us, and we just can't permit that. So, David,
So,
I do wish you well. Finally, then, this is going to be a lot of work, I imagine.
it's already been a lot of work. What I'm finding is a lot of people are disheartened and say nobody's going to listen. What's the point in voting?
Right.
While other people are voting tactful voting, and they're voting for UKIP or anybody else, Lib Dems, just to bin a vote to make sure that the two big parties don't get in again because they've had enough. I don't
Yes.
think it's going to make much of a change, and it's a waste of a vote. If that's my personal opinion, because there's still party politics. The other smaller parties still have a hierarchy at Westminster that will guide them. So what I'm saying is you can make a choice. You can make a difference. I can't without your help, but together we can stand up. And if we stand up for our own areas, for the independents, and we stand together, we will not be moved. Then change will happen. But by not voting or voting tactfully for somebody who's not really standing up for change is not, I don't think, the answer. I think the answer is give us independents a chance. If we simply make a mess of it, you're no worse off. You'll probably be better off. You'll be no worse off. We've been doing the same operation with the same three parties for years and years and years, and it's
Yes.
not made a difference. As the
It's
Native American Indians say, they're two wings of the same bird. So let's change the species of the bird. Let's move on and do something independent and listen to the people for the people.
brilliant stuff. David, thank you so much for coming on. Good luck with your campaign
Thank
and
you.
all the legwork and everything else that goes with it. It will be interesting to see after the election what actually happens. But in the meantime, thumbs up.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for the opportunity to chat to you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. What do you think? Are you going to vote for an independent? Are you going to look, if you're in the area that David is in, then do check him out. Ask the hard, difficult questions, because I think you'll find the independents will A, listen to you, and B, give you an honest answer,
Yep.
because they've got no other agenda to adhere to. They want to serve you. Anyway, I'll be back with more monologues and more wonderful guests. But in the meantime, from David and I, thank you for watching and listening. Till next time, goodbye.